sheet. In this orientation, you'll learn a little bit about the Teachers College reading assessment. The Teachers College assessment is research-based. It uses Fountas and Pinnell levels, which are the same as reading recovery levels. This is nice because many of the publishers publish books with these levels written on the inside or in the back cover. The cut scores used by Teachers College are flexible. They frequently research and analyze data, updating them as needed. This test has very little ambiguity because the answers that you expect to hear from kids, even on the retells and even with the comprehension questions, are written in. It's super affordable. You only have to purchase books at levels A through K. Beyond that, you don't need to purchase the books. It's quicker than other one-to-one assessments. Students are allowed to give their answers orally, therefore making this a reading test as opposed to a writing test. When we think about growth on the Teachers College assessment, we look for kids to grow about 3 levels after level J in a year. But before level J, like first graders, would typically grow anywhere from 1 level every 4 to 6 weeks. Running records are encouraged frequently. Running records can be done with a blank piece of paper on any book, even a book that the child has previously read. That's different from a Teachers College assessment, which is used for benchmarking, which you would only do about 2 to 4 times a year. Below level K, you can purchase the books that are needed for this assessment through the Caden publisher. They come in both digital and print copies. For levels L and beyond, you can download the materials from the Reading Project website, and you don't have to purchase anything. For each level, there are 2 different sets. One is not harder than the other, and in fact, both are acceptable when you're thinking about what should you be using for benchmarking. At levels A through F, you'll read the entire book. At levels G through L, you'll just read 100 words, and then you'll read the book. The child will read the book silently. At levels M through Z, the child will read 100 words aloud and then read a portion of the book silently. The instruction sheets will clearly articulate exactly what you need to say in the text introduction. It's almost in a script-like format. You'll then record the running record right on the recording sheets. As you can see from this example, 100 words will mark the stopping place, but you can still have the child read out loud beyond that to gather additional anecdotal notes. When you're finished, you'll count up the errors. The child will consider passing or independent if they get 96% or above, meaning they only had 4 miscues. The instructional level, or the level that you'll do guided reading at, will be somewhere between 90 and 95% accuracy. Really important that you also mark any reading behaviors you observe the student either mastering or struggling with during the running record. It's these anecdotal notes that really can make a difference when you start to think about teaching points and ways to push the reader along the continuum. After you're done reading with the student and coding the test, you'll then want to analyze it using MSV, meaning, structure, and visual. This, again, will help you to identify exactly where the child's strengths and weaknesses are and what they need to be taught next. When you think about fluency, you'll want to make sure that you're making some comments, writing some anecdotal records about not only their speed, but also their phrasing and their expression. Speed is not factored into the Teachers College assessment score until level K. After level K, you're simply watching that the child doesn't fall below these benchmarks. As long as the child at level K reads 60 words per minute or more, then they're considered independent. At levels L through M, you're looking for 70 words per minute, and at N through O, 80 words per minute. Now, while many researchers disagree about the exact number that this should be, One thing is for sure, all of them agree that slower than these benchmarks is problematic. The next part of the test, you'll do a retell, or a child will do a retell or a summary. I recommend that you do that orally. During this time, you can use prompts like, you can use the text if you need to. What happens next? Tell me more about that. What you can't do is say something specific like, what did Bumpy do after he fell off the fence? Okay, that's too specific for a retailer summary. Anytime a child voluntarily answers one of the questions when they do their retell, then you no longer have to ask that question when you get to the question answer section of the test. You're looking just for the kids to have a gist in this portion. Small, minor errors like a character name is not a problem. You're just looking to make sure that there aren't any major misconceptions. If you're wondering if the child's retell is adequate, you can reference the Teachers College materials for sample retellings. There are both literal and inferential questions. You don't have to ask those if the students released that information or were forthcoming with that information during the retell. There are four questions. Kids must attempt all of those, both literal and inferential, and need to get 3 out of the 4 correct to move on to the next level. And here you can see an example of what that would look like. In order for a level to be considered independent, you must answer yes to all of the questions in the independent level box. If you answer no to any of those questions, then the child is not independent at that level. Here are some common questions, and I'd like to go over the answers when you think about the Teachers College assessment. With level A and B, you really are only looking to see a few behaviors. And if the child passes the behaviors, the child can move on to the next level. They don't actually have to have an accurate reading. Kids had such a hard time passing the C because it's significantly harder than that AB. It's the first time we really see kids having to use all the systems to try to read. I'm not sure whether you'll be looking for the independent or instructional level. It depends a good deal on what you're going to use the assessment for. If you are using the assessment to determine what they should be reading during reading workshop, what the child can read by themselves with no help, you'll want to be looking for their independent level. You want to find their instructional level when you want to find out where should you be letting the child read with support and help. Where should you support the child in guided reading? And sometimes a child can have more than one instructional level. Sometimes a child might even have 3 or 4 instructional levels. In order for a text to be independent, the child will need a 96% accuracy. They'll need adequate comprehension. And at those higher levels, they'll also need to pass that fluency threshold. Yes, kids can really look back in the book. Oftentimes people will ask me, do I have any tips on where to start kids out in reading levels? This is what I typically do. What I'll typically do is take a book that I know really, really well. For example, Magic Tree House. I know really, really well to be a level M. And if I really have no idea where to start with the child, I might have them read a page or two out of a level M Magic Tree House book. And then that helps me decide if I should start at M or go up or go down. You can do the same thing like with a Frog and Toad book, which is a very reliable level K. Or any of like the Rigby PM books would have really strong levels, and you could use them in that way. I get a lot of questions about what you do if a child's ASD and therefore cannot pass the inferential questioning. So a couple different options that you have. One would be just to consider the fact that this is a good place to teach in and to try to support the child. They do not pass unless they get 3 out of 4 of those questions correctly. But that does give them a little bit of wiggle room They don't necessarily have to answer all the inferential questions right in order to be able to pass the level. I also get questions about, can we practice? Sure, the ideal is to practice, though, with either with a passage or something that looks similar to a teacher's college, and then have them just go through the motions of like the routines of the procedures. Ideally, you don't want to actually use one of the teacher's college assessments because that will invalidate the assessment. Sometimes we're thinking about like how far should we even test a child. Different districts will vary on whether or not they have a max or a cap. In Lake Orion, our cap is 1 year from the end of the year expectation. So, for example, if I am in first grade, our end of the year expectation is a J, the end of second grade is an M, then you can go to the end of second grade. And I just am very careful about how many assessments I give to make sure that I don't max out in October. But if in fact you do max out in October, you want to think about alternative genres. You might want to think about using some learning progressions. You want to think about widening the child's reading life rather than just being so concerned about going up the reading level. When you give the Teachers College assessment at levels A through K, you'll have to project the Caden book digitally, or you'll have to give the kids a copy of the paper book. And as you can see here, you'll have a scripted introduction, giving the kids a little sneak peek at the book. Here, you'll take the running record. After you've completed the running record, you'll be able to go back and analyze the errors. The test will show you where that 100-word mark is. Anything before the 100 words is counted when you think about student accuracy. Anything after the 100 words is just for your information. There'll be a small section on reading behaviors. You can certainly check all of the reading behaviors that you see the child using, but you'll also want to write some anecdotal notes on the sides if you see the kids doing other things. You'll mark the number of errors the child had and whether or not that's independent. And then you'll ask the child to retell the story. Looking for the gist of the story, you'll take notes in this paper area here. At the end, you'll ask the kids some specific comprehension questions. Sample responses are located right on the paper. And as long as the child's answer is really close to those responses, you can go ahead and give them credit. At the end, you'll be asked questions. Was the reading rate 96% or better? Did they answer 3 out of the 4 comprehension questions right and get pretty much a gist of the retell? And if so, if you answer yes to both of these questions, the text will be considered independent. At levels A through K, you'll either need copies of the paper books that accompany the Teachers College assessments or access to the Caden digital text. So for example, if I'm going to read A Rainy Day for Sammy, I'll click here and show the students the book online. We'll use this to read the story. Okay. And you can zoom in or out to make this book bigger or smaller as needed. If you can't find the paperwork that accompanies the level, if you just click on this little arrow, a PDF will be provided. At these higher levels, you'll either need to provide a paper copy of the assessment or you'll need to show the kids the text digitally. You can download levels L through Z and project it in this way, or it is a PDF, so you can make it smaller or bigger as needed. The recording sheet for these levels looks very similar to that of the lower levels. At the beginning, you'll find a scripted introduction, followed by a place where you can keep the running record and some space where you can do the analyzing of that running record. You'll find that the recording sheet is marked with 100 words so that you'll know where to stop. This is followed by a section where you can mark the behaviors that you see the child using, or those that you don't see the child using. You can keep anecdotal records on the sides. Here, you'll see a spot for you to mark the accuracy rate. Now, one thing I want to caution you about is nowhere in the beginning did I see a spot where it said start recording now, and you'll still want to make sure that you record the first 100 words. So make sure that you're doing that even if it doesn't say so. In the retell, you can prompt the kids. You can say, tell me more. You can say, you're allowed to look back in the book. And you want to just jot your notes on the retell. Basically, with the retell, again, you're just looking for a gist or general understanding. With the comprehension questions, you'll be more specific, and the directions, it'll show you very specifically what it is that the kids should say. You do have a little bit of latitude. If it's almost that or similar to that, you can certainly count it. At the end, unlike the lower levels, you'll actually answer 3 questions. You'll answer whether or not they had a 96% accuracy rate, also if they met the minimal fluency expectations, and if they had the comprehension. The text is only independent if you are able to write yes for all 3 of these answers.